On February 12, 2017, officials ordered about 180,000 people to leave communities below Oroville Dam. The fear was not that the earth-filled dam had already failed. The immediate threat was developing beside it, where water was cutting rapidly through the hillside below an emergency spillway that had never been used before. Only 5 days earlier, the first visible damage had appeared in a different structure, the concrete chute of the gated service spillway. What looked from the air like a hole in a slab was the exposed end of a failure that had been developing for decades. Oroville is the tallest dam in the United States, but a dam is not only the barrier that holds back water, it is a system of outlets that must control the reservoir during ordinary operation and during extreme inflow. At Oroville, the main tool for releasing floodwater was the gated service spillway, also called the flood control outlet. Radial gates admitted water into a concrete-lined chute roughly 3,000 feet long. The chute carried that water down the right abutment toward the Feather River. Nearby was a second line of defense. The emergency spillway was an ungated concrete crest at reservoir elevation 901 feet. If the lake rose above that elevation, water would pass over the crest and descend across the natural hillside. The structure was meant to prevent the reservoir from rising without control, but the hillside below it had no continuous concrete chute. Both systems depended on the details beneath the visible surface. The service spillway slab had to remain attached to its foundation while high-speed water passed over it. Joints and cracks had to limit water entering below the concrete. Drains had to relieve pressure. Anchors had to resist uplift. The rock and soil beneath the slab had to resist erosion if water reached them. The official forensic investigation found vulnerabilities in all of those layers. The original chute design called for a concrete slab, generally at least 15 inches thick, but herringbone-shaped underdrains intruded into the slab. Above some drains, the remaining concrete was 7 inches thick or less. Cracks appeared over many of those drains, forming a pattern visible from the air. The formed contraction joints did not contain water stops. The joints were also spaced too far apart to prevent wide cracking over the drain lines. The slab had only one layer of nominal reinforcement near its upper surface. Its rock anchors were shallow, with about 5 feet of embedment, and some were installed in strongly weathered foundation material. The underdrain system also had weaknesses. Investigators identified missing filtration, possible broken or disconnected pipes, drain holes that may have been incorrectly oriented or absent, limited collector capacity, and little redundancy. Construction records revealed another vulnerability near the location where the failure began. Specifications required weathered, soil-like foundation material to be removed until competent rock was reached, with concrete used to restore the grade. But treatment of the foundation beneath parts of the chute was relaxed during construction. In some areas, substantial portions of the foundation surface were not properly cleaned or treated. None of these conditions by itself tells the complete story. Together, they created a slab that could admit water, build pressure beneath the concrete, lose support through gradual erosion, and resist uplift less effectively than its appearance suggested. The warning signs were not invisible. Cracks had existed since the early life of the spillway. They were inspected and repaired repeatedly, but repair work was generally treated as routine maintenance rather than evidence that demanded a new system-level evaluation. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission's later review noted that crack widths had increased in repair logs and that no one assembled the available information into a complete explanation of what was happening beneath the chute. This mattered because the spillway operated only intermittently. Long dry intervals separated some periods of use. A repaired surface could look stable for years, while the underlying mechanism remained poorly understood. Then came the winter of 2016 and 2017. January and February were among the wettest months in more than a century of Feather River records. The watershed delivered roughly an average year's runoff about 4.4 million acre-feet in only 50 days. On February 7th, operators increased service spillway releases toward 52,250 cubic feet per second in anticipation of more inflow. Employees noticed an unusual flow pattern. Releases were stopped, and inspection revealed major damage to the concrete chute and erosion of the foundation below it. The immediate problem was a brutal operational trade-off. Continuing to use the damaged chute could enlarge the failure, drive erosion uphill toward the gates, threaten a nearby transmission tower, and send debris into the diversion pool near Hyatt Power Plant. But reducing releases allowed the reservoir to rise toward the emergency spillway crest. On February 8th, a short test release of about 20,000 cubic feet per second was sent down the damaged chute. The damaged area essentially doubled in size. Engineers knew that further erosion would occur if the spillway continued operating. They did not know how far or how quickly it would progress. As inflows and forecasts changed, releases were increased again. Meanwhile, debris and elevated tailwater prevented normal operation of Hyatt Power Plant, removing another route for moving water through the project. Every available decision carried risk. Late on February 10th, it became clear that the reservoir would reach the emergency spillway. At approximately 8 in the morning on February 11th, Lake Oroville passed elevation 901 feet. Water crossed the 1,700-foot-long emergency crest for the first time in the facility's 49-year operating history. The flow was not especially deep. The reservoir ultimately rose about 1.6 feet above the crest, but the hillside below contained erodible soil and weathered rock associated with geologic features such as shear zones. Its shape concentrated flow. There was limited energy dissipation at the base of the concrete crest and no continuous erosion protection down the hillside. The behavior contradicted a crucial assumption. A 2005 review had described the emergency spillway foundation as competent bedrock that would not erode. Earlier concerns raised during relicensing had therefore not produced comprehensive protection of the discharge path. On February 12th, erosion began advancing uphill toward the emergency spillway structure faster than observers had previously seen. If headcutting reached and undermined part of the concrete crest, an uncontrolled release could follow. Officials issued mandatory evacuation orders for downstream communities. To stop flow over the emergency spillway, operators accepted more damage to the already failed service chute. They raised releases to 100,000 cubic feet per second. By approximately 8 that evening, the reservoir had fallen below elevation 901 feet, and water stopped crossing the emergency crest. The crisis had involved two connected but distinct failures. In the service spillway, water entered through cracks and joints. Pressure beneath the slab exceeded the available uplift resistance and structural capacity. A slab section lifted, exposing poor quality foundation material to high velocity flow. Erosion removed support from neighboring sections, allowing the failure to grow. At the emergency spillway, shallow overtopping attacked a hillside whose erodibility had been underestimated. Concentrated flow and weak geologic features allowed rapid headcutting toward the crest. The dam embankment itself did not breach, but the outlet system had forced operators into a choice between two damaged paths. The independent forensic team rejected the idea of one simple root cause. It described a complex interaction of physical, human, organizational, and industry factors beginning with design and construction and continuing through inspection, maintenance, regulation, and operation. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission's After Action Panel agreed that key parts of the chute design were inadequate and that construction decisions contributed to slow, progressive erosion beneath the slab. It also emphasized shortcomings in how the dam safety program treated auxiliary structures. Across decades of inspections and independent reviews, important issues involving the spillways were not brought together and resolved. The lesson is not that inspectors failed to notice a single obvious crack. Cracks were noticed. The failure was in interpretation. Repeated local repairs were not converted into a deeper question about why the same system kept needing repair, what water was doing below the slab, and whether the original assumptions about drainage, anchorage, foundation quality, and the emergency discharge path remained valid. After the incident, California rebuilt the service spillway with stronger structural concrete, extensive roller compacted concrete support, improved drainage, and new anchorage. The emergency spillway area received a concrete splash pad, an underground cutoff wall, and a buttress to protect the crest from uphill erosion. More than 1,000 people worked over 2 million hours on the recovery project. The larger change was procedural. The incident led to focused spillway assessments, stronger review of owner dam safety programs, and renewed attention to structures that had previously been treated as secondary to the main dam. Routine maintenance on a safety-critical structure could no longer be assumed to be routine merely because it carried that label. Oroville shows why infrastructure failures rarely begin on the day they become visible. A storm supplied the demand. The first broken slab exposed the weakness, but the conditions that made the failure possible had accumulated through design details, field decisions, aging concrete, incomplete records, repeated repairs, and assumptions that survived because the system had not yet been tested in exactly the wrong way. If you value investigations built from official evidence, subscribe to Probable Cause Report. The dam did not collapse. The spillways prevented an uncontrolled rise of the reservoir, but they did so while failing in ways their safety system had not adequately anticipated. The probable cause was not one crack or one decision. It was the long survival of vulnerabilities that each layer of oversight saw only in pieces.